have a little kirtan for a little while? Is that okay? No objections? And then anyway, we'll see. Secret. Okay. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prista Bhutale Shrimati Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharne Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pastyachadeshatarne Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadha Shivas Adi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Okay, let's see, where are we here? Okay. What now? Okay. So we're in America. Prabhupada's in America. Right. And he is currently, I think, is it in Los Angeles? Yeah, Los Angeles. And so we'll continue on Prabhupada's visit to Los Angeles in, what was it, June the 23rd, 1969. And Srila Prabhupada has just said, if you remember, I mean, this might be a little too much to expect. Anyone remember what Prabhupada was talking about at the end? He was talking about deity worship, that the devotees must not lose their enthusiasm, otherwise the worship would become like idol worship. But where there is life, feeling, then you think, where is Krishna? Here is Krishna. Oh, I have to serve him. I have to dress him. I have to serve Radharani. She is here. Oh, I just have to do it very nicely. And as far as possible, decorate her to the best capacity. If you think like this, then you are Krishna conscious. But if you think that it is a brass-made doll or idol, then Krishna will reciprocate with you accordingly. If you think that this is a brass-made idol, then it will remain brass-made idol to you forever. But, what was the very last thing? Excuse me. If you elevate yourself to a higher platform of Krishna consciousness, then Krishna, this very Krishna, will talk with you. This Krishna will talk with you. That was the last thing we read yesterday. Pretty elevated, but still Prabhupada's saying. And when, someone like Prabhupada says anything, even something which sounds pretty, extraordinary, you must know it's true. It's actually true. Not to be taken lightly or cheaply at all. One would really have to just serve and develop the best service attitude possible. But it's possible. It's possible. with each visit to each center, Prabhupada gave the devotees more service, deepening their commitment to Krishna. All the various services were actually the spiritual master's responsibility, he said. And when a disciple cleaned the temple or performed any service, he did so as the spiritual master's assistant. Yeah. And any job done improperly was the spiritual master's anxiety. If the devotees whimsically changed the deity worship or neglected the temple, then Prabhupada, more than any disciple, would feel distress. You know, there was at least one occasion, maybe there was only one actually, I'm not sure, but there was definitely one. And would you believe it was in Auckland, New Zealand? And it happened just shortly after I left Auckland to go to England, like maybe a year later or something, that the devotees abandoned the temple and the deities and put the deities away in a cupboard. Radha Krishna deities. Hare Krishna. Because, I mean, it's a bit of a long story, but basically they decided to leave ISKCON. They left ISKCON. Yeah, and became a separate organization, supposedly Krishna conscious. And Prabhupada said that if the disciples, you know, it's one thing if the disciples are negligent, spiritual master feels anxious. It's one thing that the disciple is cleaning the temple, but actually it's the service of the spiritual master to see the temples clean. But the disciple, of course, usually or always cleans the temple, but the disciple should be conscious that I'm helping my spiritual master, because actually, you know, in a certain sense, really, he is responsible for it. But in that case, when those devotees abandoned the temple and the deities, and devotees had to come from Australia and take over the temple, you know, they only got there like a week later or something. So Prabhupada said, if the disciples abandon the deities, then the spiritual master has to come and worship them, because it's his responsibility. Hare Krishna. Whenever Prabhupada saw a disciple eager to take on more of the anxiety of preaching Krishna consciousness, he would assign that devotee greater responsibility. Anxiety for serving Krishna, Prabhupada said, was the greatest satisfaction. As Bhaktivinoda Thakur had stated, the trouble I encounter in your devotional service, I will consider the greatest happiness. Satisfaction for the devotee, Prabhupada explained, lay in pleasing the previous spiritual masters, and that was best accomplished by preaching to the fallen souls. To the degree that the devotees carried out that order, they would satisfy their spiritual master and subsequently feel satisfaction themselves. Yeah. In other words, because, well, in relation to Krishna directly, because we're part and parcel of Krishna. When we please Krishna, and Krishna's now pleased, he's happy, because we're part and parcel of Krishna, we share the happiness, because it's our happiness also, because we're part of him. It's not just like he lets us have some of the happiness, but it's very natural because we're part of him. Whatever he feels, we feel. Right, so Prabhupada gave the example of Krishna and the gopis. When the gopis pleased Krishna in the rasa dance, Krishna smiled. And when the gopis saw Krishna's smile, their happiness and beauty increased 1,000,000 times. When Krishna saw the newly increased beauty of the gopis, he became more pleased. And thus the happiness and beauty of the gopis increased even more. This loving competition increased on and on unlimitedly, and it's still increasing today. Even on the 14th of January 2022, same things going on. Even in dealings between spiritual master and disciple, a sense of loving competition prevailed, each wanting to serve the other, neither seeking service for himself. Prabhupada was increasing the duties and responsibilities in each of his ISKCON centers, and sincere disciples were coming forward to accept those responsibilities. Thus everyone was feeling satisfaction. This was pure devotional service, to be free from all material desires and to serve Krishna as directed by the spiritual master and the scriptures. When Prabhupada said that his disciples would become happy by serving Krishna, he spoke from his own deep realization of that ecstasy. Whenever he installed a deity in one of the temples, his ecstasy was greater than that of any of his disciples. At the Rath Yatra festivals in Golden Gate Park, or any public preaching function, he was the most enlivened. He, more than any of his disciples, wanted the public to come and chant and dance in the temple and see the deity of Krishna. And when they did, he was the most pleased. And if a disciple fell away, Prabhupada was the most displeased. Nor was Prabhupada aloof from the details of temple management, the cost of things, how the devotees were being received in public, how each disciple was advancing. Although his disciples saw him as the most exalted Vaishnav and intimate associate of Lord Krishna, they knew he was always available to guide them in their services. He was their leader, but he was with them. He was far above them, but he remained close to them. Only rarely did he leave them behind, as at the Los Angeles deity installation when he began to cry, speaking directly to Krishna. Krishna, I am most rotten and fallen, but I've brought this thing for you. Please take it. Except for such rare moments, Prabhupada's disciples saw him preaching and serving along with them. You heard that, Prabhupada saying that? About offering that I'm most rotten and fallen, but I've brought these things for you. You heard that? Let me see if I can play it, but the problem is this speaker system is probably not loud enough. It's really amazing. What now? Okay. Well, Okay. Let's just see if you can hear it.
If you can send me, I can play it for audio.
Oh, okay. I'll send it to you. By email?
Yes.
Okay. I'll send it to him. And we can just carry on until he gets it, because it'll take a few minutes to get there. What now? What am I doing? Okay. There it goes. There it goes, devotees. And it'll take him a minute to get it together, I assume. So that's Los Angeles. Now is San Francisco, July 25th, 1969. The day before the Rath Yatra festival, Prabhupada arrived at the San Francisco airport, where a crowd of 50 chanting devotees greeted him. Reporters stepped forward with what to them was an important, relevant question. Swami, what is your opinion on the recent manned US moon landing? Prabhupada asked, shall I flatter you or tell the truth? The truth, they said. Okay, so Prabhupada answers, it is a waste of time because it does not benefit you if you cannot live there. I mean, you got to wear one of these crazy suits. You can't breathe. What's the point? Okay, yeah. The time could have been better spent in Krishna consciousness. We must go beyond this universe to the spiritual sky, which is eternal beyond birth, death, old age, and disease. The San Francisco Chronicle printed a picture and story, Ecstasy in Concourse B, which concourse is one of the sort of corridor areas in the airport. So are you ready? Okay. On the day of the Rath Yatra parade, 100 devotees and a crowd of 1,000 gathered on Haight Street before the tall cart. The deities of Jagannath, Subhadra and Balaram, from their elevated platform within the cart, smiled down upon the crowd. A group of devotee musicians seated themselves within the cart, made last-minute checks of their loudspeaker system, and began kirtan. In the center of the cart, just beneath the deity platform, a red upholstered Vyasasan awaited Prabhupada's arrival. Sort of center, in the center from right to left, but it was at the front. And you know what? Okay, just a sec. Ramanuja Prabhu was there. Rath Yatra, San Francisco, 1969. And there's, I think, a photo of Ramanuja in the Rath Yatra, as I remember. Anyway, obviously he'd know. Okay, so now we'll hear this recording, because, what was being said was how Prabhupada, even though he's just so elevated, and particularly compared to all the devotees, particularly at that time, but any time, he's just in another dimension altogether of Krishna consciousness. But he was preaching with them and dealing with them and associating with them and giving them guidance in very, sort of open-hearted ways. But then sometimes when he was stimulated particularly strongly, his extraordinary elevated nature would come out. He couldn't stop it. And this is an incident. This is when they installed the deities in Los Angeles, and Prabhupada is now talking different things about deity worship. So it's just a short bit, maybe couple of 1 minute even. So, okay, you can start.
Krishna, just like Madan Mohan, he was talking with Sanatana Goswami. Madan Mohan, Sanatana Goswami at that time had no temple. He was hanging his deity on the tree. So Madan Mohan was talking with him, Sanatana, you are bringing all these dry chapatis and it is stale, and you don't give me even little salt. How can I eat? Sanatana Goswami says, sir, where shall I go? Whatever I get, I offer you. And so Krishna had to eat there. Because the bhakta is offering, he cannot refuse. Jimang bhaktya prajachyate. Real thing is bhakti. What you can offer to Krishna, everything belongs to Krishna. What you have got, what is your value? And what is the value of your things? It is nothing. Therefore, the real thing is bhaktya. Real thing is your feeling. Krishna, kindly take it. I have no qualification. I am most rotten fallen. But I have brought this thing for you. Please take. This will be accepted. Don't be puffed up. Always be careful. You are dealing with Krishna. That is my request. Thank you very much.
Okay, so that's pretty deep. Right, let's carry on for a few more minutes. Let's see where the section ends. So, anyway, we'll carry on for a few minutes. As Prabhupada's car approached, he could hear the cries of the devotees, and as he stepped from the car, he saw them all bow down in obeisances. Folding his hands and smiling, he acknowledged his enthusiastic disciples, and he looked around with pleasure at the large crowd that had already gathered. Turning toward the cart, he beheld the deities on their throne, the same deities who had inaugurated Ratha Yatra in America 2 years before. If you've been following it, those were the deities that were put on the back of an open back truck for the Ratha Yatra in San Francisco 2 years before. Yes, they were beautifully dressed and garlanded, and multicolored pennants and thick garlands of carnations decorated their cart. Ratha Yatra was becoming more wonderful each year. Prabhupada bowed down before Jagannath, Subhadra and Balaram, and his disciples all bowed with him. As Prabhupada took his seat on the cart, the kirtan began again, and the cart, pulled with 2 long ropes by dozens of men and women, slowly began to move forward. Buckets of burning frankincense poured aromatic clouds from the deity's platform above Prabhupada's head, as slowly the cart moved along the road to the park. How many people are behind us? Prabhupada asked, turning to Tamal Krishna, who rode beside him on the cart and had been leading the kirtan. Tamal Krishna climbed back and surveyed the crowd as far as he could see. 5,000. Sing Jai Jagannath, Prabhupada said. And Tamal Krishna then changed the chant from Hare Krishna to Jai Jagannath, Jai Jagannath. Throughout the parade, Prabhupada sat serenely watching, his right hand in his bead bag. The large crowd consisted mostly of young hippies, but also included businessmen dressed in suits and ties, elderly persons with their grandchildren and families, and a few stray dogs. A mixed Sunday crowd. Okay. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Okay. So let's have a little kirtan for a little while. And oh, do you know